activist, writer, and an MSNBC contributor. Brittany Packnett Cunningham. They are co-hosts of the podcast Pod Save the People and co-founders of Campaign Zero, a nonprofit to end police violence. DeRay, I'll start with you, but I'd love to hear from both of you on this, from your experience in past protests and in dealing with this specific issue. What has worked? What has not worked?
So let me zoom out for a second and sort of set the context. We're in a moment where a third of all the people killed by a stranger is actually killed by a police officer. And we're mindful that in March and April of 2020, the police killed the same number of people and at the same rate as they did in March and April of 2019. So COVID, quarantine, lockdown actually didn't change anything. In 2019 was actually the first year ever where Black people were more afraid of being killed by a police officer than being killed by community violence. So we think about this issue as a consistent terror in communities. The police kill around 1,100 people a year. Now, when I think about what works, and, Brittany has been, we've been partners on this work for the past 5 years, is that we know that focusing on policies, practices, and solutions really do change the outcomes. So we just launched something called 8can'twait.org that is about these 8 policies that when they're in play, when a police department goes from 0 of them to 8 of them, there's a 70% reduction in police violence, and they're all common sense. Banning chokeholds and strangleholds. Only 28 of the 100 largest police departments ban chokeholds and strangleholds today. Restricting or banning shooting into moving vehicles, requiring de-escalation. You'd be shocked. Not a lot of police departments require these things, but they actually do matter a lot.
Brittany?
I mean, DeRay's point is so well made, and I'm really, really glad that folks are able to see that work and know that these are common sense solutions. We can talk about what works in protests, but the truth of the matter is protests come toward the end of the continuum. There is something that caused them to happen, that spurred people to action and activities. It wasn't what we're seeing on the street. It was violence from police. It was the killings of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, Tony McDade, and a list that frankly is too long to name on this broadcast. So when we recognize that protests come toward the end of the continuum, we're forced to reckon with the fact that transformational, systemic, urgent, bold policy change is what's going to actually stop the continuum ultimately and not bring us back to this point in another few years. The kinds of policies that DeRay walked through don't cost much money, and they don't actually require an act of Congress or even an act of the state legislature.
What?
They just require that police chiefs actually have the courage of conviction to do what we know works and what keeps everybody safe.
Claire McCaskill, jump in.